All right, friends. Matt here with the video project on inversions. No, wait. Inverses. Yes. No. Inversion. Right. This discussion comes to you in 4 big parts. First, we'll take a look at an early and still common usage of the word inversion in music theory. Second, we'll see how those compare to a more recent employment of the term. Third, we will be confused by this comparison. And fourth, we will look to everyone's Tom Anderson mathematics in hopes of making sense out of the whole thing. I have a question for you. What makes these 2 things different? Feel free to pause the video here in order to brainstorm a bit. Perhaps you might have noticed that one lives a bit higher than the other in pitch space. You might also see that they differ in their vertical stacking, this one resting on all spaces, with the second one resting on both lines and a space. To put it succinctly, they differ in their configurations. I have another question for you. What makes these 2 things alike? Again, feel free to pause the video here in order to brainstorm a bit. They both have the same pitch class content. Read with me. D.
And then.
F sharp.
And then.
A.
And then.
A.
And then.
D.
And then.
F sharp.
And then.
No and then. So, while they differ in their configurations, they resemble one another in their pitch class content. In our European American music theory tradition, we would say that these are both D major triads, the first in root position, the second in second inversion. Second inversion. Inversions. What would the first inversion look like? This. What would third inversion look like? This. No, just kidding. We don't recognize a third or any further inversions when dealing with triads. Alrighty, just so you know, this, and even this represents a D major triad in second inversion. The same goes for root position, this, and first inversion, this. So how many configurations are there of any triad? I would tell you, but then I'd have to tell you forever. Infinity. How many overall triad inversions are there? 3. Friends, thorough bass inversions. A little while later in your music theory careers, you might have come across these 2 creatures. Same questions as before. What makes these different and what makes these similar? As always, pause here for reflection. Significant differences are easy again this time. They have differing pitch class content, they appear to be configured differently. Significant similarities are a bit more elusive, at least in my opinion. Look at their shapes. Doesn't one sort of look like the other except rotated 180 degrees? Yeah, I think so. Also, what if we smear these into melodies like this? They even sound pretty similar this way, don't they? Alright, we're on the right track. Let's enjoy that second similarity a little bit. If instead of writing on staff paper, we draw on graph paper, I think we can see what's going on here a bit more clearly. Each horizontal line represents a new pitch class, where the distance between each one is just 1/2 step. Now, this is the first chord written on the grid, and this is the second chord written on the grid. Rather than comparing the pitches themselves, let's compare the distances between them, the intervals between them. There's 1/2 step from here to here, 4 half steps from here to here, and 2 half steps from here to here. Good. There are 2 half steps from here to here, 4 half steps from here to here, and 1 half step from here to here. Nice. How did the 2 sets of intervals compare? Pause. Their interval series are reverses of one another. In other words, the operation that transforms this chord into this chord is inversion. 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 Just to be sure, there is one more interval that matters here, the interval between the top and bottom pitches. And in order to avoid a trip to the other side of the universe, let's wrap the vertical lines on this paper around into a circle and redraw our chords. There. Now the interval sequences move in reverse from one another now. Still the same answer though. All but we're not done. Some of you might rightly wonder why this isn't the reverse of that. Well, in a way it is, but it requires an extra step to get from here to there. By default, and 100% arbitrarily, inversion involves a flip around this vertical axis on our pitch class circle. With that in mind, we can see how we've sort of just flipped this chord over the axis in order to get to this chord. But in order to find this other chord, we'd have to first invert and then transpose. But in a broad sense, yes, these are inversions of one another. Good question. Friends, pitch class set inversion. Now, each of these seems to make at least some sense on its own. The word invert suggests some kind of turning or flipping or otherwise reorienting. In any case, part the first involved something called inversion, while part the second also involved something called inversion. They have the same name, but do they do the same thing? Unfortunately, they do not. Let's look at the thorough bass inversions of our very first chord, the root position D major triad. Now, let's look at the pitch class set inversion of that triad. All right. Now look at our pitch class set inversions of our first friend from the second part, and then look at thorough bass inversions of that same chord. If these were the same process, as their name might suggest, then there would be no difference in answers between the two. If you're like me, this was a bit confusing at first. Let's attempt to clarify in our final word.
I've been traveling on this road too long. Just trying to find my way back home.
Now on to the maths. What is the inverse of this? You might say this, and I'd agree with you. What about this? I'd imagine the most common answer is this. Inverse operations have this property. When combined into a string, they will cancel one another out, so long as the numbers involved stay the same, returning you back to the place you started. The thing is, mathematical inverses have another significant property that musical set inversions do not. Mathematical inverses involve dual opposing operations, while musical set class inversions involve just a single operation. In this way, a mathematician would be more likely to call what we've been doing with pitch class sets a more generic mapping rather than an inversion. For example, he or she might say that there exists a function that maps the elements of set A to set B, and vice versa. True, this mapping has a special symmetry in that applying it to a set twice results in a return to the original set. However, inverses are fundamentally dualities, a property that set inversions simply do not have. So what do we make of all this? How did this happen? Should anything be done to correct it? One answer to the first question is, as you now know, to make a YouTube video about it. A less trivial answer, however, probably involves an acceptance that the world is usually a bit more complicated than we'd rather it be. On the second question, I think we would do well to sympathize with creative people on the cutting edges of their fields. They face special challenges where the equipment, ideas, methods, and even terminology may not yet exist for the phenomena they're investigating. This is true for mathematicians just as much as it is true for music theorists. That this and this are essentially the same thing is an important idea. That this sort of looks like this, but upside down is one way to describe their differing configurations. Finally, when we remember that the Latin root vert suggests a kind of turning, we can see that inversion isn't really a bad term for what's happened here. Or even here. On the third question, I don't believe that anything needs correcting anyways. After all, truth is relative, facts may not exist, and all thoughts are meaningless. Thank you for your time, and have a good rest of your day. Just kidding. My answer to the question relies on a kind of relativism, but not such a violent one as that. Coming up with terminology is hard, and sure, we've made plenty of confusing choices over the years. Come to think of it, why do we call our middles our bottoms? No matter. Math is not necessarily more right than music. If this involves turning around, I certainly think this and this do too. Inversions, inversion, and inverses. That was fun.